Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this lunchtime panel discussion on allyship. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our chair for today, which is Jenny Tipping. So, Jenny.
Hello. Yeah, so thank you all very much for coming. We've had more than 70 people register for this event, so it's obviously a really hot topic in the industry. The initial motivation for this event came from feedback from women in transport members themselves that we need more allies. And I've been involved with various women in groups for more than 10 years, because I was a truck driver for many years and a truck instructor. And what I've always persistently heard is that as women, we cannot change the system by ourselves, but equally, we shouldn't have to. So to tackle the problem of the underrepresentation of women and the challenges that women and other diverse groups face, we need the support, but more importantly, we need the collaboration of men already in the industry. So ultimately, it's the industry itself which is suffering from a lack of diversity because we're missing out on some really great talent. So what I hope we'll all get out of today is some inspiration, but also some concrete actions to take back to our organisations. So we have with us two men who bring many years of experience and drive into this industry. Michael Tarrega is the External Relations Manager at Skanska Kostan Strabag joint venture. And he's also the co-chair and the first male chair of the FAIR network, which stands for Female Advocates in Rail. He's a communications, public affairs and stakeholder engagement leader with more than 15 years experience in the UK and Australia across both the public and the private sectors. And he specialises in working on highly sensitive multi-billion-pound infrastructure programmes that generate high levels of public and political interest. We also have Mick Skerrett, who is the National Driver Development Manager for the Manpower Group. He brings with him more than 35 years of experience within the sector, 28 of which have been in recruitment. But he's also worked with a variety of logistics companies on the shop floor in compliance, operations and accounts management. Mick is a qualified driver CPC trainer and has associations with UK Logistics, the Institute of Logistics and Transport. He is the chair of the Executive Board for Drivers and Logistics REC, and vice chair of Think Logistics, which is the logistics industry careers development charity. He's also a member of the cross-industry Trailblazer Group for logistics apprenticeships and initiated and continues to promote Manpower's Driving Academy and their Women in Driving pathway. We also have our very own Steve Griffiths, who's a mentor and coach and has volunteered for several years with Women in Transport on events and on the very successful Advanced Mentoring Programme. So that's our panel. So first of all, I'd just like to start a question for all of you. So what does allyship mean to you and what motivates you to want to do it? So we'll start with Michael Tarrega, please.
Thank you, Jenny. So allyship is something that's really, really important to me, and it's something that's become increasingly important over the last year and a half, I'd say. So I've worked in the industry, like you say, for 15 years. And as a male, I was never really sure how I could associate myself with any of our staff networks at the companies that I've been on. And it was interesting that obviously in the construction industry, we're about 9% female, 91% male at the moment. I'm pleased to say that our company is 30% female, but that's still not good enough. And what I realize is that actually there are some amazing people out there that don't come from the traditional construction backgrounds, and actually the barriers to people coming in is not their gender, it's the way that we recruit people and the way that also we accommodate people when we're here. So I was involved at the early stage of the High Speed 2 project, and we had we were kitting out all our offices, and you had these like massive male changing areas, then tiny female changing areas. I'm thinking you're already putting the barriers up to people coming into this industry by doing things like that, and I thought that doesn't seem right. So I started to engage with our FAIR network, our female advocates in rail staff network, informally at first, and just joining the meetings to understand the issues people are facing who work in the industry currently, and also some people who have been in the industry and have also left it because of the barriers they face. And then 6 months after doing that, I got approached to become the first male co-chair along with my colleague Kim Armstead. And they basically said to me, we really need to build our allyship because we're 70% men on our project, and we know we've got a lot of allies, but a lot of allies don't know their allies, and a lot of other people sort of feel uncomfortable being a man supporting something that, you know, that is what they would see as a women's issue. And actually it's not a women's issue, it's an industry issue. We need a wide amount of talent. We've got 4,500 people on our project. We don't have enough skills in the industry at the moment. We need more people. If we're putting barriers up to women or to anybody, that's not good enough. So I set the challenge with Kim, my co-chair, to actually try and really go down into that detail of how we can make this company that we work in, our project, more welcoming to everybody, including women, to make sure that we actually keep and retain the talent that we get in. We don't have a problem with people joining the industry at the moment, but we do have a problem with people with staff retention. People are leaving the industry, and it's for many reasons, one of which is that if people don't feel welcome, they're not going to stay. And I'm really passionate about making sure that anybody feels welcome to join our project and has equal opportunities to access the promotions and also the facilities that you'd expect whoever you are.
Thank you. Mick, same question to you. What does allyship mean to you, and what motivates you to want to do it?
As I was pointing out, of the 35 years of experience, I've seen and experienced the barriers within the logistics industry, and being professionals in the driving scope and within the logistics industry over many years. And I wanted to be a bigger part of the solution in terms of trying to reduce the barriers. So what Michael just said, the facilities, the access to the employment contracts, all of that needed change. And unless I was speaking up for that change, I didn't feel like I was part of the solution. It needed, there's something missing from the logistics industry for me, and it is that diversity and giving access and inclusion to others to come in there so that they can feel comfortable within the space that's open to them. That the industry itself has always had a problem of its image, and that image has been at the forefront over the last couple of years, so it's highlighted to everybody. But unless we remove some of those barriers, and I support the inclusion of the diversity, then it was never going to move. It's to its undying shame that the logistics industry only has something in the region of 1-2% professional drivers across a whole spectrum of sectors. That needs to improve. But women, as an example for this, won't enter the industry, in my opinion, if there is nobody there to help and support while they go through that process, until those critical masses, that inclusion increases.
Thank you very much. Steve, do you have anything to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll sort of like echo a little bit what both Michael and Mick have said. One of the things that got me involved with women in transport was the advanced mentoring scheme that you've already mentioned, where I just got involved through connections with somebody I was working with, who's actually on the call today, Matthew, who sort of talked about the need for a little bit more inclusion, a little bit more work done by people outside of the specific groups, like in this case women, to try and support them to do it. And it sort of got me thinking that I've actually had a very successful career. I'm a white male, and I recognise that I've had a lot of privilege in having that successful career, and I've had opportunities and things in my life which other people, and in this case women, but generally other people may not have had those same opportunities. So for me, the allyship part of it was sort of probably later in my career than I would have liked. And I feel that recognizing that level of privilege that you have as an individual and recognizing that you can actually make an effect and do something about it. I think you said right at the beginning, you know, any particular group that's looking for a bit more inclusion and equality can't do it on their own. It needs allies across the board to do that. So for me, it was not quite an epiphany, but it was a moment when I suddenly looked at myself and held the mirror up and thought, well, actually, I can do something here. I can make a difference, and that's really sort of why I got involved with Women in Transport, and that's why I think allyship is such an important thing for any EDI type of activity within organisations to help things move forward.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'd like to get into a few more kind of concrete examples of what's actually been done, because I think a lot of the time then we hear kind of, well, I want to help, but what should I do? You know, what can I actually do? So I'm going to ask Mick first. What do you do to support the women in your organisation?
So Manpower's on the recruitment side is very female centric, very inclusive as an organisation, and it does go broader in that. And our whole ethos is about doing well, doing good, in and around supporting people getting sustainable work. But in our pillar of logistics, we really push forward now. There was the, I don't know whether you want to call it a vision or epiphany, about 8-9 years ago, when you're realising how much we lack talent within the logistics industry, is what things would we need to do? And we started down the pathway of looking at a driver academy, which is getting newly qualified drivers, professionals, into that employment quicker before they get lost to the industry. And that was across the spectrum of all diversity, whether it's males, females, whatever background. We was trying to support that and give them help and advice and support to get that goal at the end of the work that they want to do, the sector they want to work in. We're making a success of that. We wanted to go that one step further. So quite successfully during the pandemic, the academy continues to blossom, but we've bolted on the top of that we've got the investment there now to support some of our colleagues through a program called Women in Driving, where we're sponsoring females specifically from all backgrounds within our organisation to gain professional driving qualifications. In the same vein as the Driver Academy, we're giving them the opportunity to get all of that background help, interview support, introductions to employers, but we're also sponsoring them and bringing them together in cohorts within the program, so that they're getting that extra support from people like myself and other people within the team. So they've got a mentor, an ally that they can go to, somebody that can support them through the process. That might only be simple things like filling the forms incorrectly, that can be incredibly complicated, but equally need to be done right now so that you get the quicker response, but also helping them with things like going through the theory side of it, building confidence when it comes to getting to going for the tests, etc. So that it takes away, hopefully, some of that pain by being able to share experience, the development, the understanding that other people have got within our organisation, can share that back into people who are new to the whole process, which can be very daunting, whoever you are. Whereas it's supporting and helping women and addressing that lovely figure of 1-2% professional drivers within the industry and trying to improve that. It's small at the moment, but we know it will build. It's got to get better. It gives us the opportunity to benchmark what we need from the people, what we need to give back in terms of developing people through the test process so they're more successful, and hopefully improve the situation for women as a whole going into the logistics industry, but also the process of getting there as well.
So yeah, so I'm hearing a lot about kind of smoothing the transition to kind of just to make just to remove the barriers that that people have.
And you'll know, Jenny, you see the barriers for whoever you are, but especially for women, in that just the simpler things of what it takes and some of the attitudes that come back that we can support with. Some people are a little bit more robust than others and they can take that, but without a little bit of support, they don't always want to push through that barrier.
Yeah.
But with that little bit of support, you can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Certainly my answer always is that I'm naturally bloody minded. I'm naturally a rebel. And I think that we'll have a success in this industry when you don't have to be those things and still be successful. Yeah. Michael, what about you? Concrete steps that you've taken?
Yeah, so thanks, Jenny. Everyone is frozen on my screen, so I don't know that I'm frozen on yours, but I can hear everyone perfectly. So hopefully I'm not some sort of some strange pose at the moment. But we've done two really big concrete things. The first one is quite simple and actually is more related to my job role, which is why I think I was asked to join the network. So as comms person, often what happens is we're expected to do our social media interviews and press releases and all that with the most senior person, and it's always the MD or it's always the senior director. And as Steve sort of mentioned earlier, they always tend to be white middle-aged men and things like that, and then that is the demographic that people tend to think of the industry as being as. So what I've done is I've totally changed it round and also upset a few egos on the way, and basically just a simple thing of now picking the most relevant person to do a role, whether that's a woman, whether that's a man, whoever that might be. So I'm now giving opportunities to more junior members of staff who are excelling in their roles, who have the passion and the skills to demonstrate to the wider audience that our industry is a great place to work. And it's not about just going, we need a woman, we need a certain type of person, because I would never like to do that. It's about picking the most relevant person. And the most relevant person often is someone who's more junior, who understands the work they're doing better and can deliver it more passionately and at a more real human level. And that's how people engage with media now, particularly in social media. So that's a big change we've done. If you look at any of our videos, you'll see a really diverse mix of people on there, and they're all chosen because they're the best person to do the specific task that we've asked them to do. And so when director A comes up to me and says, "Why didn't you use me for this video?" I said, "You're not the most appropriate person. You're not close enough to the work. You don't know the detail this person knows, or you're actually covering such a wide area. You could only talk strategically, and we want to go into the detail." So as long as you explain it to people and understand, it's not about just putting people up because of who they are. It's about the fact their role is most relevant, and that's absolutely key. A really good example of that is on the 14th of June, we have a big high-speed rail conference where we've got the high-speed 2 minister speaking and things like that. Now that normally is territory for just people like me and our MD and our directors to go to. Instead, I'm going with 4 women who have basically supported us massively from a comms perspective over the last year. And I've said to our directors, you don't need to go to this. You go to these things all the time. These people have never been to a parliamentary type event, and they're the people who have really helped to improve our reputation over the last year, more so than anyone else. And I want to give them that opportunity to come. So in a group of very senior people, we've now got 4 much more junior people who actually will be able to add value to that conference, more so than a group of minds that isn't necessarily that diverse. And the second thing, which is a much more formal thing that we're doing, is linked to I know Sonia's rolled out the Allyship program in women in transport for the last few years. And after she spoke to us at our event in March around the successes of that, we've actually now launched an Allyship program as well across the project, which is completely voluntary, because we don't want it to be a tick box, you must do this, otherwise, like code of conduct type stuff, things that we want people to actually want to engage with it. And we've actually done loads of practice sessions, particularly with our site teams, many of whom don't have English as a first language, are from very different cultures and backgrounds, to make sure that training is relevant to them. It doesn't just speak to the office people. Of our 4,500 people, 3,500 of them work on site all every day and don't work at computers. So this is in-person delivered, and we've tried to make it relevant to those site teams who don't get access to this sort of training normally. They just get health and safety training, code of conduct training, things like that. We actually want to bring those people into this space rather than making it just a corporate endeavor. And we've taken a lot of feedback on about how we deliver this to make sure that it's appropriate for everyone, and they really feel that they can be empowered to be good allies if they wish to be.
Excellent, thank you. I'm interested, when we did a networking event, and we were just going out in breakout rooms talking about allyship, and I asked the women what did it feel like, what was it like to be on the receiving end of good allyship, what actually happened. And a number of people said things like being promoted for a job that they wouldn't have thought of, that they had the confidence to do themselves, or being told about being encouraged to go for a project that they wouldn't have thought that they were ready for. That could just be good leadership. What's the difference between good leadership and allyship? Michael or Mick, do you have a preference as to either feel ready to? Okay, well, Mick's smiling, I'll give it to Mick.
I don't think there is a difference, Jenny. Having led large and small teams with quite a broad set of diversity within the teams for the task, I think you need to be a good ally, a good supporter of your people, to be a good leader. It's not always you can read all the books on how to be a good leader or anything, but if you've got that engagement with your team, they've got the faith in how you want and what you want to achieve, then it will transfer into you being their ally and how you support them through the process, because then they're feeling that they've got the ability to approach, be engaged, hear what they need to hear, what they want and what support they need, and it builds one alongside the other. I don't think you actually have to have a dividing line that says, here I am as your ally and I can't be your leader. You can be both of those things, where you can support, nurture, build, whilst being the leader of that team, the manager of that group, getting towards a goal. I don't see the difference.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What about you, Michael?
Yeah, I agree with Mick, and actually I think it comes down a little bit to people's perception of what leadership is. If you think about how leadership traditionally has been portrayed in the media, it's often a very powerful man, who kind of, is often maybe quite aggressive in tone and kind of, they almost intimidating. They walk into a room and they've got gravitas and things like that, and that's how people traditionally look at a leader, whereas an ally would be seen as someone who's a bit more sympathetic and understanding things like that. And actually that's kind of incorrect, because a good leader is someone who actually understands their team, works with their team, and also not just the people that they might line manage or things like that. It's actually about like embracing the whole people they engage with, whether it's once or whether it's every single day. And I think that's the key thing. A really good example is we've got a very senior director who manages a team of approximately 700 people, and he had been in the industry for 35 years. And he said, I've had training in absolutely everything. I started off as an engineer, as most of them do, and things like this. He said, until I was 35 years into my career, no one had ever offered me any kind of opportunity on being a good leader and leading a team of people. His job is simply to lead a team of people. He has everyone else doing all the work, but he manages 700 people. Yet he's had all the engineering training he could possibly want, which he doesn't really need now. He's got that understanding. He'd never been trained how to like, you know, lead a team of people, but he'd been doing it for 20 odd years of a 35-year career. And he actually requested through his company to get training in that, to understand, to make him be a better leader. And it took, you know, that's a really positive thing to do, because most people, when you get to that level, you think you're beyond training, you can't learn, you're there to teach other people and you're already at the top. But actually you're always learning. And he realized he had a weakness in his skill set when actually it was the most important part of his role. And so I think being a good leader is also understanding where you have challenges. Some people can be great allies naturally. Some people, it won't come to naturally, and they need to think about it, and they might be a bit uncomfortable. If you want to be a good ally but don't know how to go about it, ask the questions, show a bit of weakness. You don't have to be powerful in everything you do just because you're a leader. And I think that's a really key part to the difference between leadership and allyship.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Steve, do you have anything to add on that?
I totally agree that a good ally and a good leader are synonymous. You can have a leader, but you can, without being a good ally. But that leader needs to have allyship and good allyship skills in order to be a good leader and a great leader. And you know, if through my career I've seen a number of the very macho ones that Michael was talking about, who thump the desk and tell you what to do and all the rest of it. And you know, that era for me in the rail industry, which is the part of the transport industry I'm involved in, is a thing of the past. But there's still a lot of work to do to convince, particularly when we're talking about women in the transport industry, to convince people that a woman doesn't need to be a man to get on. They don't need to be a man. They don't need, you know, as a male ally, I'm not there to convince and teach women that they've got to be more like me in order to get on. I'm there to understand what it's like to be a woman in the industry and what I can do as an ally to help. I don't know what it's like to be a woman in the industry because I'm not a woman in the industry. I'm not a person of color. I don't have a disability of any sort. I'm not differently abled. There's so many things that I don't experience. I haven't had that life journey, but I can still be an ally to those people by listening and understanding. And that would make me a better leader than just thinking I know best and telling them what to do. And that's something that I think in the rail industry, we've moved a lot away from, but there's still a way to go. So yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. The two things have got to work together to get the best out of the teams and to get the best inclusion and equality within our industry.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff about soft skills, and in terms of learning to listen, learning to genuinely see things from someone else's point of view, and which is rather convenient because that's the area I'm moving into in life. I remember, Michael, from one of your first responses, you said something about men being unwilling to get involved because they think it's a women's issue. And how do we get past that?
That's a very good question, and it's quite a tricky one. And I mean, it obviously needs good allies to really kind of sort of open about the issues and listen, but also you have to have moments, to be honest, that are a bit uncomfortable. If you're going to disrupt the norm, you have to do things that are a bit different. And a good example that we did, and this took a lot of bravery from some of our women in the network, was we did at their request, we did what we call a toolbox talk, which is a sort of briefing that goes out to all staff in person, particularly the site-based staff, at their start of shift brief. And we did it on the monthly cycle and menopause. And these women got up in front of, let's be honest, about 90% men on site, and talked about it. And firstly, they put themselves in that really uncomfortable position. But the way they wanted to pitch it, and they devised this all themselves with very little support from corporate comms, things like that, was that how many, first question, how many of you have got daughters, or how many of you have got mums and things like that? And obviously most people put their hand up, or have you got friends who are women and things like that? So this is why this issue is relevant to you, and this is how it works for us. And it's something, you know, I've got no sisters or anything like that. I didn't know about the issues either that people face with all that stuff, and for them to get up and stand in front of them and to captivate an audience that at first were thinking, what the hell am I being forced to go to this for? Because they were told, you've got a toolbox talk for this month, you're going to it, you're signed off site for the time. So there was a forced element to it, but they didn't know what it was going to be about. And they have it every month anyway about different issues. But when this came up, at first you could see people were like, what the hell? But actually that has really helped to break a barrier, because people now have a lot more respect of kind of the issues that women face around that, which men can never understand, never begin to understand, but can also relate to the fact that if someone says, you know, one of the people stood up and said, sometimes I get really, really bad pains and I have to go off for an hour and things like that. And you know, I won't tell you why it is, because that's uncomfortable for everyone. But sometimes you just got to accept that I need to take a bit of time off, and that's how it works. And I thought that was really, really powerful. And it's led to massive changes in how we do things. And you know, providing sanitary products in the offices and things like that has now come around because of that, because they campaigned for it to be like a more open conversation and not something that's hidden. And that everyone is now aware. And I'd like to think that people now understand a bit better the issues women face that men can never understand, but at least they can be a bit more appreciative when someone's having problems with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, even just hearing that, I'm kind of excited and a little bit uncomfortable, and it's really, really brave of the women, but also brave of the organisation to have put that event on. That's fascinating. Yeah, exciting actually. Yeah, Mick. What was it that I asked? Oh yeah, how do we make things easy for for when men consider it's a women's issue? How do we persuade them that it's not?
And that was brave in terms of we have quite a structure of regular events that address some of those issues of inclusivity and difficult conversations, and making those conversations a lot easier for people to have is one of the ways that you have to break the barriers down. I think if the conversations are open and available within your organization, then it does support bringing people in and taking some of the barriers down, and making that, maybe I think I spotted one in the question before, is how do you when people don't recognize some of these issues, don't want to recognize the issues, what do you do? But you have to be brave within the organization, both on an organizational level, but as an individual, to be open to talk, to understand, and make sure that there is that respect of what is required, whether it's, you know, for women, for a cultural background or whatever. It needs that level of support to get you to the next level within your organization. Otherwise, it just gets trapped in a corner, and then it's only happening on little small individual levels, and it doesn't broaden the conversation further afield within not only your organization but connective organizations. Because you've been out on the road as much as I have, Jenny. You know, you get out there and you see different organizations doing different things, and you're the representative, being a driver of an organization. And if you're talking that organization up in that space, then it's only going to help other organizations to change the way that they operate. I'm sort of out of Michael saying I'll get taken away some ideas from this where you can move the conversation on in different areas. And we have for all our permanent and temporary staff, we have a thing called Mind Path, which is about skills development, but you could take that a little bit further in terms of bringing the emotional intelligence and the inclusivity into that as well.
Yeah, thank you. Steve, I wonder if you've had, in your work with women in transport, have you had male colleagues say, why do you want to do that? And what do you say?
I've had some, in the last sort of 5 years that I've been involved with women in transport, I've had some interesting experiences. One that immediately sprung to mind was the big logistics diversity challenge that Women in Transport had a team, which was a bit of it's a knockout type of event that was promoting diversity and inclusion within the logistics industry. And we had a team, we had t-shirts, these lovely green t-shirts with Women in Transport on the front. And we went to one of the events, and the blokes who were running the event looked at me and a couple of the other guys who had these t-shirts on, and were like, "You're not women. What are you doing? Well, it's ridiculous," you know. And it was a real sort of, I was taken quite aback by it. So I've had lots of experiences like that where, you know, when I go to events and meetings, I'll wear the pin badge for Women in Transport, and people look at it and question. But actually, I look at that now as an opportunity, and it's a really good opportunity to then explain who Women in Transport are. It's not just women, it's men as well. There's allies. It's important that we have that, and it's important that we have the discussion. So I've had quite a number of things like that where I've had that sort of thing, and initially, I say, very awkward. Now I find it quite good, because it gives me the opportunity to have that conversation with someone. And I think that leads on for me to picking up the points that Michael and Mick have made about things that we've done within the industry and individual companies and individuals have done. I think one of the big things for me around this is consistency. So doing a one-off event, doing a, having a Women in Transport Day or something like that is great, because there's things you can hang off that. But actually, it's about consistently having those discussions, consistently having those messages going across, consistently breaking those barriers down, because we're not going to do this with one big event or big thing. We're going to have to do it gradually by breaking down the barriers as we go along. And one of the big things for me with allyship is it doesn't have to be a big, massive thing. You've create this massive event or this massive program of help for people. It could be small things, and it doesn't have to be just leaders doing it. It can be everybody in the organization can be an ally. Brendan said consistency is also habit forming, and that's absolutely right. So getting that consistency of message, consistency of challenge is really, really important. I love it now. When people ask me the question, it gives me the opportunity to talk about it.
Excellent, thank you. Right, shall we move to questions? I've got another couple that I could say, but we might have those at the end. So if we see what's there is in the chat, there was one from Joanna Hill. How do you embed a culture of equality at a business where some people don't recognise that there are barriers in place for women working on the front line? Do you have any advice for when the biggest barrier to making changes for women in your organisation is other women who are living and breathing the micro biases? Michael, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I do. So it's a really good point, because obviously in any big organisation, you're going to get people at different levels of understanding and also interest in trying to reduce the barriers to things. One thing we did was we did a video of real lived experiences to all of our senior leadership team, and it was done during COVID, so that's why it was a video. And we put it forward with loads and loads of examples, and everyone sort of turned around at first and went, "Oh my goodness, that's really bad. At least that doesn't happen here." And then we turned around and said, "These are all things people have experienced on our project. These are all directly related. We've only kept it anonymous to protect people and kept it vague like that. But all the scenarios that were covered in that were from us. So it is our problem, and it's something that we need to resolve." And when they sort of heard that, and we turned around as a network and said, "You're the leadership. If you want to change things, you have to understand that this is our issue, and you have to help us to instigate change, because we can't just do it alone." And I think when you make it their problem and actually be quite honest that we're not perfect. Everyone likes to be like, my company's perfect, things like that. Don't be like that. If there's issues that need to be addressed, that's what leaders and MDs and all that are there for. If it's an engineering issue, they want to be first hear about it. If it's an issue to do with equality and diversity, they should be the first to know about it, but often they're not. It gets hidden. So I think that's the key thing. Bring it to the forefront and be completely honest and frank with them. You're not going to lose your jobs over it. If there's real experiences that are happening, then they need to be raised. They can be raised through networks like our own. So I think that's a key one. And I think also the more people that support the networks, become allies and things like that, just starts to drown out those people that really aren't interested in stuff. And you do need some strong people, allies and people within, say, the staff networks, who will call things out. You know, I had a director come up to me the other week and said very sort of in a very sort of I don't know, sort of patronising tone, "Are you looking forward to your women's event today?" As if with a sort of assumption that because I'm going to be with a group of women, that's going to be really, really good and really like fun. And I'm like, it's a serious work meeting that like I'm really pleased to be part of. It's not about hanging around with a group of women and just having tea and coffee and chatting. I said, actually, this is about instigating real change. And just finally, the slightly controversial part, maybe to my thing, is sometimes we can get hidden behind EDI policies and things like that. And we do need to make sure that we kind of challenge EDI as well, because corporate policies around EDI always sound very good and things like that. And people want to do the right thing. But often that can mean that you end up not changing stuff because you've got these very set policies you work within, and everyone follows policy rather than doing the right thing. And I think there is a way to manage EDI policies in a way that makes them a bit more accessible to people, rather than you can do this, you can't do that. It's not as black and white at that. So we need to use the policies to help drive forward the diversity agenda.
Excellent, thank you. Mick, yeah.
Totally agree with all of that, but I think you can also move within the space as well as calling things out. Is creating forums and groups where the discussions can happen about what needs to be improved, what needs to be discussed, whether it's a week for inclusivity, whether it's a week for menopause, whether it's all of that. You've got to create that cultural discussion on a larger level so that you can address and not always be stuck within the vertical of your policy. You know, this is the way we do it over here, and there's no space for improvement or moving away from it. And it can go down to a micro level, so people have got places, safe spaces to discuss what's happening around them as well. Whether there's enough technology these days, the WhatsApp group, whatever, the power of those can be quite underestimated. We have a little WhatsApp group just to support the ladies, the women that are going through our driving program, and just the shared experience and what they've experienced, what examiners are like, what it's like to go for the theory, what it's like to go for the medical. Some of that trepidation's taken away. If you're doing it in the, I'm not going to call them the more serious issues, but in all of that needs addressing, then it will support and just bring some of those barriers down. So other people are seeing the discussion happening, feeling more comfortable in the space.
Yeah. And I think there's an issue with feeling more comfortable with addressing your own privilege. I think if there's a fear that you're going to be, hit with a big diversity stick, then people are much more likely to be defensive. And I mean, I'm a woman in a very male-dominated industry, but according to every other demographic, I'm privileged. I'm white. I'm middle class. I'm able-bodied, and so it was only when I started to really explore whiteness and racism, and I did get called out. It was only then that I started to really acknowledge my own privilege. And if you want people to do that, then it has to come from a place of, we're all learning here. We didn't create this system, but we do stuff to recreate it. And so let's learn about that, so it comes with curiosity and openness rather than you've been a bad diversity person. Yeah. I wonder if Steve, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's, for me, a lot of this is education, and creating the space for that to happen. As Mick said, the space for those conversations to happen, but also ensuring that your leadership teams within your organisations are also getting that education and that opportunity, because quite often I've seen it in organisations where the training's for the troops, they're for the people out there, you know, they're not for the leadership. They're the ones running it, they're the ones driving it, but actually often they're the ones who need it the most, because they're furthest away from some of the issues. And you know, we talk about microaggressions, educating yourself around microaggressions, educating yourself about language, is so important for these things. And I think one of the other key elements for me is that both Mick and Michael have talked about calling people out. And I think that's so important that we do that as an ally, as a person in the organisation. But it's really, really important that we do it in a positive way that actually helps to educate and take people forward. And I've had it before where I've been called out quite rightly on something in a very aggressive way, and my natural instinct is to be very defensive about it. Whereas actually what I should be doing is saying, thank you for calling me out on that. I'm now going to go away and think about that. Can you help me re-educate myself, understand the issues which I clearly don't understand? Not everybody's like that, and you know, there is a thing about how you embed that in an organisation by taking the business forward together. It's got to be educating people, whether forced education, and you know, we shouldn't have the tick in the box as Michael said earlier, but we should have mandatory training, mandatory educational things, whether they're a course or whether they're a workshop or whether they're a staff network group that all the directors and all the leadership team have got to attend. That's really important, I think, and that will start to move things forward within organisations. But it is all about education for me.
Thank you. Have we got any other questions in the chat, or?
I think Sienna has asked a question about including Black and minority ethnic. Yeah. Okay,
yeah. So Sienna, apologies if I've pronounced your name wrong. How have you included and centred Black and minority ethnic, LGBTQ+ and disabled women within your allyship journeys? Question to Michael.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I saw it come up in the chat and I'm glad you asked it. So we have 4 networks, staff networks, and we used to operate very independently, to be completely honest. They all grew up, individually, and kind of had their own agendas, which actually were completely aligned with each other, but there was never any real sort of collaboration between us. We had like a monthly meeting together and things like that, but really it was like that sort of generic update of what each of us are doing, and then kind of going, oh, that sounds great. We've now moved it around to be much more kind of like a joint network. So whilst we have our 4 angles, we work together. A good example was when we did International Women's Day. The reason that Sonia came and spoke to our group on the 23rd of March rather than the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day, was because it's also Trans Visibility Awareness Month across the whole of March as well. And one of the big things that our Pride group said to us is when we talk about women's stuff, we always just talk about women as, you know, as you'd expect, and we don't sort of cover sort of trans women and things like that. So we sort of said to them, well, what about if we did like a neutral day? And yes, it's an event that we lead, but we'll work with you to make sure that we make sure it encompasses the other network's requirements as well. And the same with Pride Month. The Pride Network, which is obviously this month, they're doing an event and they're working with us to make sure that, you know, we all work together. And actually the key message of all of these events that we do is consider joining the networks. It's not join this network or that network. We don't work in competition anymore. We work kind of together, and it's all about opening up about the wider networks. We've also got like our BAME group as well. We've also got a parent and carers network as well, and we've got a fledgling disability group, which one of our office managers is very passionate about and is looking to start up on the back of our International Women's Day event. and the whole idea is that we work collaboratively, because at the end of the day, we want to reduce the barriers to equality and diversity, and we all have that same goal.
Thank you. Mick, do you have anything to add?
Echoing that, within Manpower, there's some very, very strong networks and forums that are associated to all of this way, LGBT, all of trying to be as inclusive as possible, but keeping that conversation open and aware. I think that's the point, is that within your allyship is to bring all of the inclusivity, all of the talent, all of the people together as much as possible, and recognizing where that talent is, especially within our organizations, to make sure that you're getting the right people doing the right thing. And then also creating that network, that forum that is inclusive and they're comfortable to work with within the forum, with all of the people all of the time. It's against what Steve was saying before, it's an education. People still have to keep learning.
Yeah.
My employment journey started a long time ago, where none of this, and the banter could be incredibly offensive, but tide has moved on, and you need to move with that and be aware of other people.
Yeah.
Or else you end up with a very stale organization and a failing organization.
Yeah.
Because you won't recognize the talent and the people that you need.
Thank you. Okay, so just one final question. If you had one piece of advice for someone wanting to take a step towards allyship, what would it be? Let's just go for Steve, actually, if that's okay for you. Yeah.
Yeah. My one's quite basic and simple, really. Just do it. Just get involved, do something, talk to people in your organisation. Most organisations will have staff network groups. Go and approach them, talk to them, find out, what their issues are, what you can do to help as an ally. But just do it. Just get off your bum and do it.
Thank you. Mick?
I think you need to understand yourself as well. You need to understand what is it that you need to be an ally, to be supportive, be engaged with other people. How do you appear? How can you be more approachable? If you don't understand that, it's not always easy to move into that space. You've got to be open and aware of yourself and who you are and how you appear to other people. I mean, it was something early in my white collar journey. You start to realize when you stood at, I was then about 18 stone at 6'4", big, broad, people are looking at you and thinking, oh, is he as approachable? What is he like? And you do get classified, you do get that judgment of self by other people before you even get close to them. So there's that self-examination and understanding yourself and how you can make yourself a little bit more approachable and offer, in the right mood, your experiences, your support to make things go forward.
Excellent. I love that answer. Yeah. Michael, what's your...
They're both brilliant points. And the only thing I'd add to it is ask questions. And it's quite similar to Mick's point and Steve's point. Don't be shy. You won't get everything right. I've learned a lot as an ally. I've not done everything right in the past or even now. And it's about being open, honest about yourself. And if you don't understand something, ask questions. If you don't understand something about LGBTQ stuff or anything like that, just ask someone that you trust about what it means. Then put yourself in their shoes if you're comfortable to do so and they're comfortable speaking to you, and just try and actually do a bit of learning and find out someone's different perspective, because you can never be that person, but you can start to understand some of the things out. So ask questions. People are quite open if you're really interested in finding out a bit more about them and their journey.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. That's been an absolutely lovely discussion. I've really enjoyed that. So I'll just hand over to Steve for some final notices, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny, and Michael and Mick as well. Thank you very much for your contribution to this discussion. I think this is for us in Women in Transport. It's a bit of a starting point around allyship. We've been talking about doing something like this for quite a while, and I guess my challenge to everybody who's on the session, if you're not an ally already, go and think about what Mick and Michael and myself have said. Think about yourself, what you can contribute. Go and ask questions and talk to people, and absolutely get involved, because it's the only way we're going to change things. Whether it's the Women in Transport side of things, or any other group, any other sort of group that needs allies to help them and to work with them and to support them and to be supported by them. So please get involved. On the chat, there's been some interesting things around books and some allyship training that Neil has put forward. So please have a look at the chat there. This video recording will be going out to everybody, so you can re-watch it and re-listen. If you've got any other questions which we haven't answered, I'm sure there's hundreds of them that are rattling around in your minds. Please email us. Email me at steve@womenintransport.com, and I'll make sure we get that round to the speakers, and then we can try and give you some further answers. Thank you again for everybody for attending. Thank you, Jenny, Michael, and Mick, particularly for making this happen. We've opened this to non-members of Women in Transport, which we don't always do. But it's great to have so many of you here. If you're not a member of Women in Transport and you'd like to be, and I'd highly recommend it, please go to www.womenintransport.com, and there'll be a page on memberships there. We're very, very inexpensive, and we add a lot of value, so please do so. That's my final pitch there. I'm going to stop recording now, but thank you everybody for coming along.